anorak phone call.
What's an anorak?
You're not going to catch me on that. Oh, this lady is talking about an armoured sail.
At number 3, Red sails in the sunset. At number 2, we are sailing. And at number 1, Arnott Sail. Now on in Henry Street and Grafton Street and tops with the shoppers.
Okay, Jackie, could you just say goodbye to the people of the loving earth? A big smile and a goodbye. You know.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, sort of.
Well, that's about it from me. I'd like to say goodbye, but I'm afraid I can't. I'll just say farewell and Happy New Year.
Settle down, studio.
It's 9 o'clock. This is Bob Gallico. Good morning. The Labour Court is expected to try to intervene in the Dublin bus strike, now entering its third day. The dispute involving members of the National Bus Workers Union is over the operation of a radio system and a monitoring device. The Labour Court chairman said his staff had contacted CIE and the Bus Workers Union to see if conciliation talks could be held. Meanwhile, the NBU General Secretary, Mr. Tom Darby, said the row could have been settled before Christmas if the company had agreed to give bus crews 7 days on certified sick leave and certain free travel concessions. In County Leitrim, the search for the kidnappers of Mr. Don Tidy has been scaled down. It's believed that the former leader of the provisional IRA prisoners in the maze, Brendan McFarlane, is among those being sought. Last night, Gardaí called off their search in Leash and Tipperary, where it was believed the INLA leader Dominic McVinchy and his associates were sighted. 2 men held in Dublin about the murder of Mr. Edward Hayden on St. Stephen's night have been released from Store Street Garda Station without being charged. Detectives say they've no fresh leads on the murder. In Canada, an Ontario man has been sentenced to 23 months in prison for conspiring to smuggle guns to the IRA 8 years ago. 42-year-old Philip Kent was found guilty of trying to smuggle rifles and a machine gun barrel to the IRA in the north in 1974. Kent was convicted of the offense in 1975, but failed to appear in court for sentencing. The court heard that he and 3 other men were arrested as they crossed into the United States with the weapons concealed under the car seat. The American civil rights leader, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, is traveling to Damascus to try to win the release of an American pilot held by the Syrians. The man was shot down in a raid on Syrian positions in Lebanon. A former South African naval officer and his wife have been convicted in Cape Town of spying for the Soviet Union. Commodore Dieter Felix Gerhardt and his Swiss-born wife Ruth could face the death penalty. The sentence is expected to be given tomorrow. Defense lawyers will be arguing against the death penalty today. The conviction of the couple has once again highlighted fears that Western defense secrets may have been betrayed to the Russians. Commodore Gerhardt was convicted of spying over a period of 20 years, and it's said to be regarded as likely that he would have had access to Western defense information, at least at a low level, at an earlier stage in his career. South African warplanes have been placed on standby to repeat their attacks on SWAPO bases in southern Angola after the biggest raids in 2 years were carried out yesterday. Officials said about 1,000 guerrillas were poised to make their seasonal offensive into Namibia. 3 white Air Force officers freed from detention in Zimbabwe are due in London this morning. They were among 6 officers detained after they were cleared of plotting sabotage. Finally, in the north, a 15-year-old boy was shot in the leg outside his home in North Belfast last night. 2 men were involved in the incident, which police believe might have been a punishment shooting. The boy has been detained in hospital, but his injury is not serious. Independent Radio News from Dublin at 3 minutes past 9.
So, you were doing films then?
Yeah, I was an actor on the stage. Star of stage, screen and radio, well, hardly a star. No, I did a lot of work down in England.
Oh, in England?
In England, yeah. A couple of West End plays and a lot of television films. And cinema films as well. Playing smallish parts, you know.
What sort of, what brought you to this side of the pond?
That goes back a long time. 1954. I was trying to break into showbiz as an actor. I'd had 2 years of summer stock and 2 years of radio in the early 50s. And I was trying to crack it in New York. And it was as hard then as it is now to get work. I'd had a few walk-ons in small parts, knew a couple of casting directors. And I happened to meet my stepmother at a tea party, or a cocktail party, forgotten which, in New York. And we got to chatting, and she said, if you ever get to Ireland, no, she had introduced me to the late Louis Element's wife, Eddie Element, which was her party. And Eddie said, if you ever get to New York, look us up, and Louis will get you into the theatre. And so I took her up on it. I said, okay, not if I ever get to Ireland. I will come. I was free, white, over 21, unattached. I said, next fall, in autumn, I will come. And 3 months later I did. I just took up and left, traveled to Ireland, ostensibly for a year to work in the Irish Theatre. And then the plan was to go back and have all the doors open to me, because the Irish Theatre had a great reputation in Seattle and so forth. And I came, and I just never went back. Plans changed. I got married over here, and I liked the pace of the theatre over here better. So I had 2 years with the Globe Theatre in Dunleary, which had Norman Rodway, Godfrey Quigley, Donald Donnelly, people like that. Then from there to London, and I did 6 or 7 years of stage, screen, television, film. And then I got into film production with a company called Cary and Productions. I was a partner in it and was associate producer. We produced a few small films. And then eventually in 1970, for economic reasons, as I say, I left the business. Family had to come first. I did a lot of work, but there was never quite enough money to make it pay. One was always resting in between. So I found myself back in Ireland in 1970, totally untrained for anything. The only thing I'd ever done besides act was sales. I was in direct selling in England, because it was the kind of a job you could do at any time. You were your own
Just
boss.
walk in and do it?
Walk in and do it. You had your own hours, so it fitted in with what I was doing. I was selling, in fact, for Johnny Bloom, one of the original direct sales kings, way back in those days.
So how did you get over to Ireland and Radio Nova?
Well, I came back to Ireland in 1970. I'd been going back and forth. And, as I say, got into sales, worked for a couple of companies for about a year, not doing too badly. And then I wasn't doing tremendously well, because as a salesman in England, it was really a bit of a disaster. Basically because I was doing all the right things, but for the wrong companies. It was rubbish I was selling. Then I joined a company called Weatherglade.
Santa Claus companies?
Yeah, exactly, Santa Claus companies. And I didn't believe in the stuff, so I was doing a wonderful job in selling people on the idea of not buying the product, because I didn't believe in it myself. So I joined a company called Weatherglade.
One way to sell, something to sell.
Yeah. And suddenly when I joined Weatherglade, the sales career took off, because there was a company I could believe in and the product was good. And so for 12 years, I was in sales on the road and in sales management. And I'd given up all thoughts of ever going back into show business. I knew I didn't want to become an actor again, just per se, because I had too many other interests. And also I didn't want to start at the bottom again as an actor. I'd always loved radio. It had always been my first love. I started out, first job I ever had was in radio in America in the sort of early 50s. And one day I was driving in my car at 9:30 in the morning, which was unusual. I had been listening to Nova for about 9 months previous. Like most people, I came on it by accident. Funny, in fact, how it happened. About 2 months before I first heard it, I was reading an article in the paper which said that a station in Texas was going to beam to Europe. They had a tremendously powerful translator, and they were going to broadcast to Europe. And I turned on the radio one day when I was in the car, and had nothing really set on the dial, because I had given up on all the other small powers. And suddenly, at about 20 seconds to the hour, I heard this American voice giving the station identification, Radio Nova. And then the news came on, and at that time was a guy called Pete Moss, who was an American, one of the early Nova people. Yeah. And I thought, that's it. That's the station in Texas. I got it. Wow, what a powerful transmitter. It's tremendous. I heard the news, and it was world news. And then after the news, a commercial came on. I thought, hello, that's funny. It's a local commercial. what a terrific idea. They've actually booked time for local sponsors on this station in America. And then another local commercial. And then the next program came out, and I suddenly realized, it's not the station, it's a local station. What is this? And I was very impressed. They were very polished, very sophisticated, and my dial was set to Nova from there on in. So anyway, 9 months later, Anyway, 9 months later, I'm in the car, and 9:30, on comes the job spot, and they advertise for the newsreader. And I was getting a little bit sort of itchy-footed in the job I was in. I think I planned to leave it in a couple of years anyway, because the creative outlets that I felt I should be filling were being denied to me. Basically, being a creative person, I was getting a bit fed up. The challenge had gone out of it, really. Yeah. And so I thought, all right, for the crack, just for the heck of it, I'll do it. They said, make a tape if you can write news, if you think you have a voice for radio, if you can type. And that's the one thing I think I ever got out of high school in America that stood me in good stead.
Typing?
Typing, yeah. If you can do all that, make a tape and send it in. So just for the hell of it, I'll do it. So I went home that night, got a few of the evening papers together, compiled a 2-minute news bulletin, typed it out, recorded it, and left it into Radio Nova. And the first person I ever met, in fact, was Mike Edgar. He was the one who opened the door to me that day. And but anyway, I still persisted in trying to get into Radio Nova, even though I'm kidding. Anyway, I left it in and thought no more about it. I thought, well, that's that. And 3 days later, I got a letter from Sybil Fennell asking me to come down for an interview. So I rang up and said, what this afternoon do? Went down, had a little chat with Sybil, and half an hour later, she offered me a job. Which is quite amazing. And I had to make a fairly instant decision. I think psychologically I was prepared for it. All the factors were right. My kids were grown up. It was a calculated gamble to leave what at that time was a secure job. Subsequent events, of course, proved it wasn't so secure when Weather Glaze collapsed. But at that time, it was a calculated risk. And so I said, okay, I'll start part-time because I have to wind down this job. Yeah. For the first month, and then full-time. I mean, at that time, they could have gone wallop Nova at any time. Nobody knew. I think I always knew that I could get back to Weather Glaze.
So you've been on Nova for how long?
So about a year and a half now.
And what did it feel like to suddenly have your job whacked away way back in May of this year? Fairly heavy?
Funnily enough, I wasn't that pessimistic about it. I've always been an optimist. The first feeling, and I remember how it happened too, it was just coming up to about 9:30, and I'd given the headlines, and I had said the immortal words, news in full at 10 o'clock, and Declan said we might be making some news of our own. I didn't know what he meant, and then I found out afterwards that it was because he had spotted the P&T and the Gardaí outside the door. I knew it was a raid. My first instinct was, shortest comeback in broadcasting history. But I can always, as I say, get back to selling. And then about an hour later after that, I began to think about it. And I thought, well, someday the crunch is going to have to come. It can't last forever. There has to be legislation. And if we have support out there, now is the time to find out. I felt that they had done us a great favor, because whatever support we might have had we gone off voluntarily a few months later, in September, which was the plan, whatever support we had then, we would certainly have twice as much support, at least now, having been taken off the air. And I thought, if it doesn't work now, then it certainly isn't going to work later, so why wait? You might as well know now what the situation is going to be. And I was very optimistic from there on in. I was never really worried. When we had the close down, which is certainly one of the most emotional times, a few hours I've ever gone through in my life, that was quite staggering. We all felt a bit depressed on the Friday, but nevertheless I felt, well, there's a future there. I don't know what it is or when. And then when Chris announced he was going back on, for very justifiable reasons, because the situation had changed overnight, with the news in the paper the next day as to what Ted Nealon's plans were, which certainly did not include us. I felt it was the right thing to do, and I was optimistic from there on in. Subsequent events proved that to be correct. So
at the end of 83, going on to 84, do you think Nova's got 5 weeks, 6 months, 2 years?
Who knows? Who would have said last year that we have X number of months? I think we certainly have another 6 months or 9 months, and who knows what can happen in the meantime. I do wish it would be sorted out. Nobody likes this limbo land of illegality or...
What would you like it to be sorted out as?
I would like to be sorted, I think what everybody would like. I think there is room for all kinds of radio, and there should be all kinds of radio. There should be the national station RTE1. They do an extremely good job. They have a very difficult job to do. They have to serve an awful lot of interests. And I think there should also be community radio. But that community radio really has got to pay for itself. The country cannot afford to subsidize, whether it's 10 or whether it's 20, and certainly not 30 if it's too many. There should be community radio. And there should also be commercial radio, such as Radio Nova, whether it's under the name of Nova or under some other name. I believe in free choice. They say that the young people will be brainwashed if this, if Nova continues.
Hamburger radio?
Yeah, I don't think they are brainwashed now, and I don't think they ever will be. Once again, they undersell the young people of this country. They don't give them credit for the intelligence they have. They are selective. They will not listen to Nova all the time. They will listen to the national station. I know many, many people that are dedicated Nova listeners, but they listen to RTE for news and political comment. They have certain other favorites on RTE that they listen to. But when they want Nova-type radio, they want it to be there to listen to, and they're selective. In the same way that eventually people get selective about television. Yeah, there'll always be a certain number of people who will be mindless idiots and will sit there hypnotized. And that will apply to radio. They'll never change the dial. But the bulk of people here are selective enough to know what they want. And when they want to hear a Nova-type station with Nova-type musical programs, they want it to be there on the dial. So I think there's room for all three. There's certainly, I don't believe there's room for 30 stations in this country. It's total madness. And not 6 in Dublin. But it's a very difficult piece of legislation to put through. There's so many interests that have, want to have.
So it's going to take quite some time for the...
I think it will take quite some time. And I really believe that the sensible thing to do is what a number of people have asked for. And I think what Fianna Fáil possibly intended to do is to give temporary licenses for a year to certain stations that have proved that they are responsible and have the popularity and can be profit-making and not a drain on anybody. Give them temporary licenses for a year. Get rid of this ridiculous unlicensed situation, pirate image. And by the way, I've never regretted that I worked for a pirate. I don't class Nova as a pirate. Technically, according to the dictionary, it's a pirate, but not in attitude or in output or anything. But to get rid of this situation and to have some temporarily licensed stations while they slowly and carefully take their time and sort the thing out. It has to come.
Well, thank you. Could you say goodbye?
Goodbye, folks. Nice talking to you.
Thank you, Bob.
Edward Hayden and St. Stephen's Night have been released without being charged. A former South African naval officer and his wife have been convicted in Cape Town of spying for the Soviet Union. In Canada, an Ontario man has been sentenced to 23 months in prison for conspiring to smuggle guns to the IRA 8 years ago. And the weather for Dublin, cold, bright and dry with scattered showers later in the day. A high of 7 degrees Celsius, winds westerly, force 4 to 6 on Dublin Bay. This is Stephanie for Kiss.
Are you sure?
I'm
Are
positive.
you sure? Before you go, I've got a man you might be interested in. Not him.
That'll make a
You wouldn't
change.
believe this. There's a guy roaming around the studio with a camera. Stephanie loves it. Anyway, another man you might be interested in. I have a friend who's over from America for a couple of days.
Yes.
Now, he is rich.
Yes.
He is tall. He is handsome.
Get him here.
He's a madman.
Well, why is he
And
not
his
here?
name's Mike Kelly. So, Mike, good morning. Stephanie, kiss for Mike.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. And Steph, before you go, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And see you in Egypt.
True.
Bye-bye.
Bye.